The Imperial Opera House is this week's sponsor. Get yourself down there and listen to people warble and screech their way through obscure foreign languages, achieving notes never intended for human consumption. You are guaranteed not to understand a thing, but they do sell nice ice creams at the interval. Wait, what? They don't sell ice creams? What sort of outfit are they running there?
All the tabletop role-playing news. We aim to amuse and we aim to enthuse. And Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG
Hello, and welcome to Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG talk. I am Russ, aka Morrus, or Morrus, aka Russ, and with me this week is...
Peter Coffey from the Southampton Guild of Roleplayers. Russ, as ever, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. But wait, we have a visitor.
We do have a visitor.
Yes, all the way from the States, flown in and so forth, especially for the podcast. And boy, their arms must be tired. It's James Mendez Hodes.
Yo, what's good?
Hereby referred to as Mendez.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, happy to be here.
How are you? How's the weather over there? I'm sure it must be better than what it is right here.
It's bright and it's shining, and I'm in a high-risk group for COVID-19, so I can't go outside.
Exciting times.
That is unfortunate.
No. I go outside once a day to go running, but I live in a small suburb of New Jersey where I can swerve easily around other people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll be fine.
Russ, as we know, Mendez has been involved in many exciting projects, including 7th Sea, 2nd edition, Tales of Swashbuckling Adventure, worked on Scion as well, that game where the children of gods are going and causing all sorts of problems. Definitely a lot of indie stuff as well, like Monster Hearts 2, a sequel to Monster Hearts, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, sequel or new edition.
Yeah. Of course, Geist Decinators, which is about ghosts and humans that are attached to them, or vice versa.
Yes.
I have heard of it, never had a chance to play it, and while I have seen play, but never had a chance to, Urban Shadows, which I guess I would describe as sort of powered by the apocalypse meets vampire. Is that accurate, or am I just
Yeah, that's a good assessment. There's I guess you might generalize it to urban fantasy in general. So you got your vampires, werewolves, wizards, weirder things like ghosts and revenants, various kinds of immortals. So it spans media influences from stuff like vampire or werewolf to other genres of urban fantasy, like even gargoyles, which we were talking about a little bit before the show. Yeah. They got some of that feeling.
I do like a good gargoyle.
Yeah, so I suppose we could do some sort of news talk now.
Should we do the news, shall we? Let's whip through the news.
Excellent. I've not been paying attention, so this is going to be exciting for me.
This is going to be exciting. So there's a big bit of news this week. Wizards of the Coast, the latest Dungeons & Dragons storyline, was going to be revealed at an online event on the 18th of June, which is what?
Now, were they going to go and jump straight into the announcement, or were they going to do another pre-announcement of the announcement?
They generally do get to it early in the show, I think.
Oh, okay.
But when's the 18th? Is that next week? The week after? Next week, maybe.
What does time mean?
Who knows? Well, time has lost all meaning. But, unfortunately, it appears to have been leaked early.
Oh.
Their partners, D&D Beyond, posted a YouTube video, which they very quickly deleted. I think, within minutes, they deleted that video, but not before a few people grabbed some screenshots of the cover of this new book.
Oh, okay.
Which is unfortunate. But, I mean... This could be, it did occur to me, this could be an elaborate troll on the part of Wizards of the Coast, and they're trying to... it's completely fake, but I wouldn't put me past, because every single book they've released in the last, 4 years has been leaked early. And I imagine they're probably getting a bit frustrated with that.
Yes. It seems rude.
So really. I'm wondering when the time is when they start playing this disinformation campaign.
Yes.
So that their announcements actually... It wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, what this is all our guesses of an Icewind Dale-based storyline were correct. That's what everyone was...
go with all the ice-themed art that's been...
because they've been putting out ice-themed art. They had that T-shirt with a cute little snowy owl bear on it, and they've been They've been hinting at it, so it's not a big surprise. But this is called Icewind Dale, Rime, that's R-I-M-E, not R-H-Y-M-E, Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Yes. So the snow-covered ground of the Frost Maiden?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Rime is sort of ice which forms on surfaces, isn't it? I think. And the Frost Maiden is an evil goddess in the Forgotten Realms called Auril.
Oh, yeah. I really should know that one. I was just running a module.
To be fair, I didn't know. I didn't know till I looked it up. My Forgotten Realms lore is woeful.
I was like, I don't know any of these gods. They mean nothing to me, so I just swapped it out for Irish mythology because I could.
Yeah, well, Icewind Dale is one of the few areas of the Forgotten Realms that I do know something about, though, because of the Crystal Shard.
Yeah.
Which I read as a teenager.
Yes, likewise. I think we're talking about that front cover because it's very iconic. It sticks in your mind. Yes.
Yeah.
Although I must confess, I was a bit vague about what a furball was for quite some time. I was like,
to be honest, I think D&D in general is pretty vague.
Furball guys.
Yeah. Well, D&D in general tends to take the names of mythological creatures and just change them into something else half the time anyway, doesn't it?
Right. Where I think the Rakshasa is the worst offender for me there.
And now Medusa's quite a bad one too.
Yeah, they got Medusas and Gorgons.
Gorgons are apparently a sort of mechanical bull with a petrifying breath. I'm like, no, Medusa is an instance of the class Gorgon. Get it right.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, what about the Rakshasa? Because I'm a bit less familiar with that one.
So Rakshasa is a shape-shifting demonic humanoid from South Asian mythology, and they're present all through various kinds of Indian epics and all kinds of through all kinds of Hindu mythology and even Buddhist and Jain mythology. But there was an episode of an urban fantasy detective show called Kolchak the Night Stalker from back in the 20th century, where they had a monster which they called a Rakshasa. Yes, in the distant past. So they had a monster which was some kind of shapeshifter from India, and they called it a Rakshasa, but the one on the TV show had a tiger face.
Right.
Yes.
And so now, I guess Gary Gygax must have liked that show or something, because now in D&D, all the Rakshasas have tiger faces, and anyone who's familiar with Indian mythology comes to this and is like, oh, my favorite religious / mythological figure. Why does it have a tiger head?
Well, there's been a couple of articles on my site recently, which have been delving into the origins of some of Gary Gygax's creations, and a lot of them come from obscure plastic toys.
Yeah.
Well, I say obscure. They might not be obscure to others, but they're obscure to me. But something called Ultraman, the plastic toy series.
Oh, Ultraman, right, it's a Japanese tokusatsu series.
About, I'm not familiar with it myself.
Superhero.
But there was a set of toys, and about 8 different D&D creatures are literally, I think it's things like the Umber Hulk and some of the weirder ones are just literally just those toys.
It just goes to show that basically the fine traditions of DMing everywhere, where you're like watching TV and you're like, oh, that looks cool, I'll whack that in my campaign. They've got deep roots. Deep roots is what we're saying.
I respect the commitment to unoriginality. I try to have as few original thoughts as possible because those are scary and risky, and I fear them.
Well,
and the originality is difficult,
I'm saying this in like a funny, ironic voice, but it's not actually like, no, this is my actual approach. No original ideas ever.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Everything I do is a love letter to the Ghostbusters game in the 1986. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, he's laughing when he says that. It's true.
It's true. It's totally true. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Anyway,
so
we were talking about Icewind Dale.
Yes.
Just quickly. So it was originally posted on Reddit by a guy called Smite Might, this screen grab, and it was only a tiny little picture, sort of like a couple of inches high.
Yeah.
And then over on Geek Native, which is an RPG news site, They ran it through some kind of image enhancing application.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite know how these things work, but managed to blow the image up. So you've got a big full screen image of the front cover of this book. And it makes it very, very clear. And basically there's a great big snowy owlbear, giant owlbear with horns on the front cover, flanked by a wolf of some kind.
Yes.
And
there's somebody who's suffering from a nasty case of death.
Yes, he doesn't look very happy.
Cold. Seen better days. I'm actually quite interested in this because I really like the novel D&D stuff.
Mm.
Like the ones where they've actually come up with their own stories, because I found things like Tales of the Yawning Portal, Ghost of Saltmarsh. It's nice that they've been brought up to date, but they haven't really changed. They're not that up to date.
Yeah.
They're not as exciting for me. Who knows? Perhaps we'll get all sorts of exciting things.
Perhaps. Just sticking with D&D for the moment, and then we can move on to other things. We found out that the next storyline after this one will be released in September.
This year? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's I feel like I'm getting spoiled with D&D content this year, because we've had Feros already, and now we've got Ryan Frostmaiden coming up, and then there'll be another
Actually,
storyline.
no, I'm wrong. No, it's this one that's going to be in September. I'm a complete liar. I'm making stuff up now. I'm completely wrong there. It is this one that's going to be...
He's just Monster Mendez. What are we to do with him? I don't know.
I'm only here this week. You have to deal with him all the time.
I know, thank you.
He loves it. Don't worry, Darryl will edit me and I will sound informed and competent. It'll be amazing. He won't now.
Look, he's an editor, not a miracle. Right?
Yeah. Anyway, so Greg Tito over at Wizards of the Coast had an interview with the site Screen Rant. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned it's a really long interview actually, but he mentioned that this Icewind Dale thing is going to be released in September, so they're announcing it next week on the 18th,
right?
And then it's going to be released in September. But also during this big announcement event, they're doing this kind of weird, I don't quite know how this works, some kind of weird reality TV style D&D feature.
Reality TV D&D feature.
They describe it as performative cosplay, deductive roleplay.
So they're basically LARPing D&D?
I'm not sure. They say it's something similar to something
there's
called...
already a name for that, and it's just called LARPing.
Yeah. Guys, this is not new.
Is anyone familiar with something called Mafia/Werewolf?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Werewolf is like a party game?
Yeah, it's a social. They call it social deduction games.
Oh. Right.
I remember playing this in high school. You know, you sit around in your living room with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then there's one person who's kind of the MC, and then everybody gets secret roles.
Yes.
And you're trying to cast suspicion on other people while avoiding suspicion yourself.
Or the hitman.
Right. Yeah.
And then you say,
okay, yeah. So that explains what this is then. Okay.
Yeah,
so
and it's got all sorts of different things.
Okay. According to the storyline, there's a prison warden who's a wizard, and he traps a group of suspects to some kind of crime, and then he sets them challenges. And there's 10 players, and they're all like celebrities. And one of them's the culprit, and each is played by obviously a different performer. And over the weekend, the cast members, they get reduced one at a time in some manner until there's just 3 left on the last day.
Isn't there like a whole genre of anime and manga with this model?
I don't know.
Quite possibly.
I believe you. I don't know though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little behind on that kind of thing, but this sounds like the kind of thing that I've heard friends talking about. Coming out of Japan. I don't know, maybe going back to related to the battle royale tradition,
right?
Like extreme storytelling.
Yeah.
I
don't know, but I guess we'll find out next week exactly what it is.
Yeah.
What's this? Reality RP, I think they've called it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. One of the little tidbits that did come out of this interview as well. Last year, or a couple of years ago, Wizards of the Coast, because they do an awful lot of market research, and they're able to do a lot of demographic research in that and work out who's playing role-playing games. And I think it was like 39% women a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And we were saying that has increased massively since the days of sort of 5-10% before. Greg Tito says that it's approaching 50-50 now, which is a massive increase.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's one of those things where role models help.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't say it actually was 50-50, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was at 39, that's pretty much 40. So it doesn't have that far to go to get to 50, I suppose. So I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
well, I guess it's expanding so much.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, when it gets to the point where the actual players are, like, represent the population, is when you've basically got it about right, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd have thought so.
And women are 50% of the population, so they should be 50% of the players. And if they're not, then there's got to be a reason why they're not.
Absolutely.
And that is presumably people putting them off because they're not very nice people.
No. Well, fortunately, the lovely people are outnumbering them, which is often the way I find.
Absolutely. Okay, I think
I've been hopeful that I guess democratization doesn't sound right, nor does
popularization.
Yeah, I guess
the removal of gatekeeping from the hobby. Has been
the
really
removal
solid.
of gatekeeping, specifically through play on Discord and the ways that Generation Z is reshaping and reformatting like the way that new players engage with D&D. I think that may have a lot to do with it.
I think streaming is definitely a massive part of that because people see themselves represented in the shows that they're watching. And I think
there's definitely still gatekeeping in like a lot of these new online communities that we're seeing popping up over the past few years, but a lot of them also have more robust tools to counteract the kind of gatekeeping that we're used to seeing at conventions and game stores that have become, basically like cliches in the culture.
Yeah. And casual sexism is way less cool than it used to be.
Yeah.
Before people just be like, it happens. And then it's like, that's very rude. You can't say that.
I think
you're going to have to get out of here and go into politics, where apparently it's totally fine still.
Yeah, and I think probably, every time someone tunes into some live-streamed D&D game or something, and they suddenly realise, hang on a second, that's not just 5 middle-aged white men. That is a good thing. And that, and they might say, hey, this thing might be for me too. That's a...
Yeah.
Well, it seems wrong.
But hey, talking of that sort of thing, there's some big RPG sales for the whole Black Lives Matter movement going on right now.
Yes.
So
what are they on to? Over 1,000 games, is it?
Yeah, well, that's one of them. So that will be, I don't know how you pronounce this, Itch.io?
Itch.io.
Itch.io.
I always thought it was itch.io, but I've heard people pronounce it every which way.
I don't know.
You can call it Itch.io if you like.
I'm going to go with Itch.io. Okay. This seems easier. Fewer syllables. But yeah, so that's the biggest sale. And that currently has, I'm looking at it now, over 1,000 products on there. Over 800 creators. It's worth coming up to $6,000 in value. The whole bundle that you get, and it only costs you $5. At least that's the minimum donation. You can pick that up for $5, and all the proceeds are donated.
It is really a really brilliant bundle. And what I love about this is that it's bringing together big names like, Blades in the Dark and Lancer. Celeste is on here. Like indie games you might have heard people talking about, like A Short Hike. And then there's also a lot of games you might not have heard about by like up and coming designers, like Adira Slattery is in there. Lucian Khan is in there with Dead Friend.
There's a couple of like really micro titles. It's not just tabletop RPGs either. It's also computer games
and video games, all types of things.
It's fantastic value for money. I mean, I don't think you could even get a copy of Blades in the Dark for $5-10.
Yeah, there's so there's so much stuff there now. I think if you were to buy that, I think it would take you so long to sort through it.
I will never play all of these in my whole life.
Let's have a look.
No way, I ain't got time.
1,304 creators at present. It's raised $5.4 million, which is astonishing. And the offer ends in 3 days. Well, 3 days, 17 hours, so 4 days.
Yes.
So
if you're listening to this,
this goes out tomorrow on Saturday. So you've got until Tuesday.
Yeah,
Tuesday.
just quick.
Monday or Tuesday.
I've let the guild know about it, but this is just such amazing value. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really
absolutely.
Also, yeah.
So the proceeds, just so you know where they're going to, they're going to the NAACP Legal Defence and Educational Fund.
Yeah.
And the Community Bail Fund, and it's being split 50-50 between those two charities.
No.
Good stuff.
Yeah, but that's not the only one. It's not the only one. There are other sales. So,
really?
DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG.
I'm listening. So
DM's Guild has a Black Lives Matter spotlight, and so you can buy D&D material from people of colour. I looked at it. There's only 11 items in the spotlight. Actually, I thought it would be a little bigger, but there's 11 items. But there's a couple of bundles in there, so it works out to about 30 supplements in total. So that's on DM's Guild if you want D&D specific stuff. If you want more general stuff, over on Drive-Thru RPG. They have a spotlight page, and that includes stuff like the Cyberpunk Red Jumpstart Kit, and some bundles which have things like Rocket Age, which was, I think, Cubicle 7 Rocket Age, and Shadows over Soul, and a whole bunch of other different stuff. And again, the proceeds from both of those spotlights go to charity too.
I'm liking the sound of that.
Yeah, it was kind of I didn't that Drive-Thru RPG thing. I was surprised I didn't actually hear about it. I just stumbled across it by accident. They didn't really send any press out about it.
Is it?
It's a good deal.
Yeah.
There's some cool stuff here.
I think something expensive is about to happen to me. I've got to be honest. It's not too expensive.
Well, that's
actually,
the thing. It's not even expensive, is it? That's the beauty of it.
I was already in on the itch.io.
That's a hard one to turn down, isn't it?
It's like it's basically the default's $10. I was like, I don't like having. It said it's $5 and it said it's $10. And I was like, what am I even quibbling for? This is immense value. And that was when it was 740 games. So I hadn't realised they were adding to it.
It's so hard to resist that combination of avarice and altruism.
Exactly.
They got me. They got me right.
Greed that you can feel good about. That's amazing.
I know. Weaponise that stuff.
Yeah.
It's way forwards, man.
Right, Origins Online. I'm going to stick on the Black Lives Matter front for a moment.
Yes.
So Origins Online has been cancelled.
Origins Online.
So the Origins Game Fair was postponed due to the pandemic until I think it was October, somewhere later in the year anyway. And in its place, Origins Online was set up, and that was due to be like next week, really close to now. I'm not sure
something like
exactly. And I'm not entirely sure what happened behind the scenes. But a whole bunch of companies and hosts and presenters and attendees started pulling out of the online convention because GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association, were not publicly stating their support for Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Now, as I understand it, and I might be wrong with this, it isn't so much that they just kind of forgot to say anything. It's more that they were actively not saying it. Do you know what I mean?
I see. They've been invited to comment and have been like...
I couldn't tell you what conversations went on behind the scenes. Who knows? Who knows? But anyway, lots and lots and lots of people started pulling out.
Yes.
And
so I also didn't follow the specifics of the behind the scenes stuff, but the way that a lot of the withdrawals were framed did make it clear that it wasn't just about this one public statement. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I got to say, when I hear GAMA, I don't have a good connotation with them just from this podcast. It's like, we're not against them. We're quite for game association manufacturers, but yeah.
I had a good time the one time I went to Origins, but it was the whitest and malest convention I've ever been to. It made Gen Con look diverse.
Right. How long ago was that? Just out of curiosity.
Son.
This was 2 years ago.
Oh, not that long ago either. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kept doing this thing. Like, I remember there was a time when I was wandering around the exhibit hall with one other Asian friend, and every time we'd run into another Asian, like, even if we didn't know them, we'd be like, "Oh my god, come join our gang!" And like,
yeah.
we're like huddling in a group with each other, like for warmth and safety.
Yeah.
Because like I kept, there were so many times when I was at Origins, and I'd just be talking to someone, I'd be like, "Hey, watch this." And I'd step back, and I'd get up, and I'd turn around 360 degrees. And then I'd sit back down, and I'd be like, yeah, I saw one person of color. It might have been a mirror, I'm not sure. Which, like, and there are a lot of wonderful things about the convention. It's really easy to navigate. The Games on Demand program is great, and that's an awesome space to be in. But it was extremely monolithic.
Okay. Is it accessible?
It is... So, do you mean like
in terms of physical accessibility?
Physical accessibility, I think it's actually better than most conventions. I've only been to
that hard. In fairness,
yeah.
There's a lot of stairs.
Because it's like because a lot of it takes place in basically just one building that's arranged essentially as a line. So everything is really close to the street, and it's relatively easy to get from the convention center to a lot of places to eat without having to like trudge all over the place. Like it's again compared to Gen Con, where you have to, if you walk out of the convention center, you have to wander through downtown Indianapolis a bit. There are fewer streets you have to cross, so that I think is a good deal easier. Although there are a couple of like eating spaces which don't seem super accessible. But yeah, like that could be, I think, a huge advantage for Origins. But there are some other things that they got to work on too.
Well, they have released a statement finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the statement, they've now sort of unequivocally stated that they believe Black Lives Matter, and they've come out and put out a press release, literally saying that. So I won't read out the entire statement because it's quite long. But they are. They state that they do believe Black Lives Matter. They're offering a full refund to exhibitors and sponsors and advertisers and attendees. Anyone who's put some money into attending the thing. Also, they're matching dollar for dollar any exhibitor or sponsor or advertiser or vendor or anything like that. Anyone who donates the amount that they're owed for Origins Online. I'm trying to get this straight. So the amount that they're owed, you can opt to donate that to charity, and there's a list of six relevant charities there. And if you do so,
they will match
Gamma will match it dollar for dollar.
Nice.
Right.
And they reckon that could exceed $100,000, depending on how many people opt for that and how many people don't.
Fantastic. It's a good time to be a charity.
Yeah.
Get in, do that.
So there's six charities: the Black Lives Matter Global Network, the Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, the Columbus Freedom Fund, the Community Justice Exchange, the Innocence Project, and NAACP.
Excellent choices.
Also, as an aside, they've also just one day later cancelled the actual October Origins Game Fair. But this, because of the pandemic, they say there's a high likelihood of a second wave of the virus, and they've decided to not go ahead with the show at all this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I think I saw some reports that cases are already spiking here in the United States after there have been some very optimistic reopenings.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on some better news, shall we? Right, Pathfinder Kingmaker, the video game.
Yeah.
If you are a console fan,
Yes.
on August the 18th, Pathfinder Kingmaker is coming to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One with a turn-based mode, which is something people have been asking for.
Right.
And this is a new edition of a game that's been out for a bit, right?
Yeah. I think was it last year, the year before?
Kingmaker.
I'm not sure when. Yeah.
Sorry.
Cool.
But no, I quite liked it. I mean, it's basically similar to the old Baldur's Gate games.
Yeah.
But a little updated graphically. And based on what I find unusual is it's still based all on the Pathfinder First Edition rule set.
Yes.
Which obviously they're not publishing anymore, so...
No.
I don't quite understand the choice behind that and why it wasn't made for second edition.
I guess they had it made. Yeah, the last time I played Pathfinder Kingmaker was November 25th, 2018.
Right, so 2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, more news. Let's have a look. Owen Stevens, who's been on this podcast before. He started a new hashtag on social media, and the hashtag was called Real Game Industry. And basically, it's just a big, long series of tweet-sized, because he posted them on Facebook as well, but tweet-sized, I want to say truth bombs about the RPG industry. You're looking at me like they're not mean-spirited.
Like Owen's a great guy, but I'm getting a bit gun-shy at the moment, and like it's been a long, it must be nearly a decade of when I hear gamers, it's like, do I need to worry now? Is someone going to say something horrible and associate it with my hobby?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
And therefore, by extension, with me. Yeah. Okay, so Owen said some. This is
very industry side stuff as opposed to
So he's talking about like toxic or possibly harmful practices within the professional side of the game industry.
Okay,
not so much toxic, I don't think. He's talking about imposter syndrome and he's talking about pay, which is obviously
pay is low, and everyone feels that they're not good enough to be in the game industry.
Yeah. I mean,
he did talk a bit about the drinking culture, right?
He did, yes, So he basically said getting into the industry was more a case of attending a convention and hanging out at the bar than it was sending good work to publishers. Well, some of the other things he said, so I'm just going to whip through these because I'm not going to read all of them because there's tons of them. He talks about the pricing of RPG books, and he says that tabletop RPG books are not overpriced. You should regard them as specialty, technical, creative writing, social interaction manuals. Yep. And says that at double the current prices, they would not be overpriced. And that is why most RPG creators leave the industry, along with the constant fan harassment.
Yes.
So, he's basically saying the money's not in there, and also people aren't very nice to you.
Angry nerds.
Yeah.
The worst sort.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He also says imposter syndrome is a massive, massive part of the industry.
Yeah, for real.
Which I think that's not just true of the RPG industry, though. I think that is generally true of people. I think most people do suffer from that to an extent. There are exceptions, but I think certainly most people I know, I definitely think do to at least an extent.
Yeah. I think the RPG industry does have some of the lack of structure, which is often what invites a lot of people into the industry and what makes them want to be here. I think some of the lack of structure and certification, and especially like formal full-time jobs, which are usually for most people like the signal that they've quote unquote done it right.
That they made
there's very few of those, aren't there, in the RPG industry?
Yeah, there aren't a lot of those.
Unless you're working for Wizards or Paizo or one of maybe a handful of companies. There's most people are freelancers who work in their spare time, and have another day job, and that's almost the entire industry.
Yes,
which is also
vast majority.
Sort of leans into the whole, people don't get paid enough, and the reason people don't get paid enough is partly because the industry itself isn't big enough to generate the the revenues to make these companies big enough to pay people full-time wages. What was I going to say? Owen also said there's 65 people. This is going back to his list of truth bombs about the industry. He says there's 65 people in the Origins Hall of Fame. He says that most people can't name 5 of them. I think I would agree. I don't know who's in the Origins Hall of Fame myself. Most creators can't name 10. He also says they are overwhelmingly, although not entirely, white men. Which is unsurprising. I know
that the Concept of Actual Play has won an Origins Award.
No, they've won a Diana Jones Award.
That was the Diana Jones Award.
You say that every time, but
I do. You do. I was like, I should apologise to Origins. I'm still salty about
the Diana Jones Award is also extremely white and extremely male.
Yeah. Anyway, a whole load more truth. I won't go through any more of them, but there's a whole load of them, and we can stick a link in the show notes, and people can check them out because I compiled them in an article just for convenience. Some of it's interesting, some of it's obvious, some of it's surprising. It's worth a look.
Yes. Owen Casey Stevens. We'll put a link in the show notes, and that'll be good.
Right then. I'm just looking if there's any more news that I have missed. I think we may have pretty much covered it. Do we all feel informed and educated now?
Super informed. Yes. Education complete.
Yeah. Well, guess what time it is now then?
What time is it?
It's time to play our favorite game. It's time to play the game. Our favorite game in all the world. Guess the Kickstarter from just the name.
I think it's time to play our favourite game in all the world.
Our favourite game in all the world?
The game where I read out the name of a Kickstarter and you guess what it is from just the name.
Oh, that game.
That game.
Right.
Yeah, I was supposed to play that. Yeah, why not?
You were so hoping it was D&D, weren't you? But it's not.
Oh, I was looking forward to a quick game of Battleships. To be perfectly honest with you.
Battleships, yes. Battleship sounds like the perfect podcast kind of game. It's like, audio is
right?
a perfect
We can
medium
just-
for that game.
We can even do the sound effects.
Right, so Menace, you're not familiar with the game, are you?
No, I'm not. Tell me all about it.
Well, you've just heard the
You've just heard the
entire
rules and the title all in one go.
Okay.
So I read out the name of
Great.
a Kickstarter, you guess what it is, and I give you some points. And that's basically
Okay, what are the
it.
encumbrance rules for this game?
Well, the major encumbrance is Russ's pronunciation.
That
so
doesn't help, but, you know.
that's a major encumbrance.
Well,
but, yeah,
if people wouldn't name all their Kickstarters with really bizarre fantasy names full of apostrophes, maybe my pronunciation would be a little better. But, you know, all I can do is try and read the words I see on the screen.
would it?
All right, would you like to go first, Peter, and then Mendes can see how...
I'll go first.
All right, then. So, what is folk magic of the Haven Isles?
Bloody awesome names, what that is. Folk Magic of the Haven Isles. I think it is a splat book. I think it's for a setting that I don't know. Maybe it's a third party for Pathfinder, second edition or something like that. That'd be quite good. And you've got like the Haven Isles, and this is essentially a book of sort of low-level cantrips and magics and magic items and like little rituals you can do to like not really like big powerful spells like fireball and stuff, but like like cool little spells like how to summon cats or how to find your one true love and so forth. And it's a book full of that which you can just plop into your setting. Or maybe it's like, I don't know, it's localised itself with folk magic of the Haven Isles. So, yeah, I guess there's probably some sort of... I'm hoping that there's at least one spell in that book where you undo knots to get extra wind
So
power.
you're saying it's a spell book for Pathfinder?
It's
Short
a spell
version.
book,
Short
a
version
source
of that.
book. There'll be magic spells, magic items, low power, quite fun.
Okay.
Probably Pathfinder.
Okay.
I'm hoping Pathfinder.
You're sort of right, but it's not for Pathfinder. So what this is,
it
it's a book for OSR games, Swords and Wizardry in particular, and it's based on British folklore, with a big focus on magicians, wizards, and magic users. It's
nice.
60 pages, 19 pages of which are full-colour illustrations, and it has a whole bunch of magic user subclasses and spells, all based on British folklore.
Yeah,
Pretty
that
clever.
sounds quite good, actually.
So
Where's that come to an end?
yeah, so you got half of that. You got the basic concept right, but you missed the British bit and you got the system wrong. So 5 out of 10, I think, is a fair score.
Well, it's not called the Haven Isles, it's called the British Isles. Yeah, that's not me.
Okay then.
Sweet.
So Mendes, would you like a try?
Please.
Okay then. Ooh. Okay. This is a pronunciation possible issue, but I'll give it a try. Enchiridion of the Computarchs.
Of the Computarchs.
Oh, come on, Russ. What?
And
This sounds like... is that the full... That's the full title?
yes.
Well,
That sounds like a Valerian and Laureline storyline, like from the old French comic. I think that the computing part makes me think of like a cyberpunk or a contemporary thing,
Right.
but the fact that the word Enchiridion is used, which is like an old timey word.
What does that
I know from
mean? What does
Adventure Time.
Enchiridion mean?
It's a big book.
It's a big book, is it? Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like a codex or a tome.
I've learned a thing. I feel clever
of the
already.
computer. Yeah. This could mean a lot of things, but I'm going to guess that it's. But are the Computarchs good guys or bad guys, or morally gray figures? So
Tricky.
I think that it is a book of player options for. It's a book of player options for a fantasy setting that purports to be genre bending. Like, it's a fantasy setting that involves some futuristic elements, like it's post-apocalyptic and there's old technology lying around, or else they're starting to get into like steampunk stuff or cyberpunk stuff that they want to combine with a traditional fantasy kind of
Like
setting.
the Appendix N sort of
You
jazz.
are correct.
Wait, really?
You are correct. So it's for the Dungeon Crawl
Nailed it.
Classics RPG, which is a
okay.
fantasy
DCC.
RPG. However, it's a book on developing and using casting mechanics and concepts in high-tech settings.
Nice.
What?
So somehow, out of me mangling those words, you basically described this thing perfectly.
That makes it an excellent title. If you know what an Enchiridion is, which is like a handbook.
Yeah, I suppose it helped
Right.
that you knew what that
Copy
was, because I had no idea. But
Yeah, I was like,
Thank you to Adventure
I don't know.
Time.
yeah, well,
there we go. I'll play this
congratulations.
subject,
That is definitely 100 points out of 10 for you.
wow. Right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, riding high, man.
Yeah. So, Peter, you're a long way behind now. 100 points to
yeah.
5 at the moment.
But it actually seems legit this time.
All right then. All right, Peter. All right. Can you catch up with this one?
I'll give it a
Okay.
go. Go on.
What is?
Hit me.
You're gonna like this one. It's one of those single word ones. You love those.
Okay, yeah.
Roll.
R-O-O-L.
ROLE.
Oh, I actually know what this one is.
Well, that's just what
I
you get.
actually
Isn't
saw
it?
this one.
I think it is a manual. It's sort of like a non-fiction book, for what that makes sense of. It's like a collection of essays about how to roleplay and looking at various things. It's going to have like a whole bunch of different authors, and it's going to be all about, these are different ways you can roleplay and how to make it fun and ways to get into character, and basically almost sort of like an improv acting manual advice sort of thing. How's that?
Well, it's basically the opposite of that.
Oh, it's telling you how not to do that?
This is it's like a Roll20 competitor, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like an online platform.
Yeah. So it's kind of Zoom and Roll20 combined into one. So it's like a Zoom with tools specially designed for role players. I think it's the best way I could describe it.
So, like Roll20.
Yeah, but I think
Exactly,
yeah.
like
So
Roll20. The same as
yeah,
Roll20.
I think it's more focused on the video than Roll20 is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think when you look at it, you see an interface more like Zoom than you do than Roll20. But it has a whole bunch of
fair enough.
dice rollers and character sheets and cards and stuff like that, kind of tools built into it.
Exactly like Roll20. But okay, so it's a competitor, but with better video code.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Good to know.
So I think you definitely scored
Perfect for podcasters.
minus 100 points there, which
Super.
puts you at minus 95, I believe. Which is unfortunate.
I'm doing well this week.
You're doing
Benders,
fantastically.
I record all my scores in modulus because that way it's fine.
Doesn't matter how you
thought it was
record them.
better.
It's-
I hear Roll has a module for this.
Okay, so this is the last one, and this is for Mendez.
Go
So
on,
all
Mendez.
you've got to do is not score
Negative
195
195. 196. Negative
Yes.
196.
to win.
I thought I'd help you out with the maths, Russ. Yeah.
So this is called Wretches with a W and Rewards.
Wretches and rewards.
I feel like Waldo should have less W's or more W's.
Okay, so the fact that there's an alliterative or assonant, I forget which word it is, that there's a title which is like
that's
R
right.
sound and R sound makes me lean towards fantasy role playing. And we haven't actually had explicitly a 5e product yet. So I feel like probability-wise, this might have something to do with like a standard Dungeons and Dragons. And I think Wretches makes me think of like some kind of more downtrodden group. So, and the combination of that with rewards makes me think of like gutter punks and thieves. So I'm imagining like a book of like thief options for 5e, like almost like a complete thief's handbook kind of feeling.
You got the system right. It is definitely for 5e.
Oh, nice.
What this book is a book of monster encounters, perfectly paired, they say, with memorable loot. It says, as a dungeon master, the traditional approach to generating loot is tried and true, but could be so much better. You set up encounters, run the players against them, then pop out the DM guide to roll on loot tables. That's the traditional way of doing it.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Is it giving advice on how to give custom loot?
Yeah, basically. The encounters have loot that is part of the encounter rather than randomly rolled after the encounter, is what they're saying.
Yes, with you.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I'll be okay for that, but it does sound like a useful tool for
they kind of say here, if the monster had a wand of fireballs in their loot pile all along, then why the heck didn't they use it? But in my games, they do.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure where that question came from.
They'll recharge tomorrow, lads. You weren't quick enough.
Well, that's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? Yeah. When you roll the treasure, the monster can use the treasure.
But well, to be fair, we've got a lot more experience, so maybe for some people this will be good. So,
okay. So it's 6 adventures around a diverse set of magic items and their associated monsters. Yeah. So I don't know how many points you got there, Mendez, but it certainly wasn't minus 196.
As long as it wasn't negative,
yes. Which means you are definitely this week's winner.
Hey,
unfortunately, there's no prize apart from the self-satisfaction and the knowledge that you beat Peter.
I'll put it on my resume.
You should.
You should. Yeah, you should. Hey, you, over there in the corner.
Are you speaking to me, good sir?
Yeah. What do you think you're up to?
I am merely enjoying a goblet of your finest mead, my fine bar fellow.
But what about that?
What about what, honourable friend?
That there, the puddle.
Ah, yes, the puddle. It does get mentioned from time to time.
You're getting my carpet all wet.
To be fair, it could use a wash.
Hey!
The puddle, you see, is created by my cloud.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. What is that floating around in the rafters?
It's a cloud, stout yeoman. A cumulonimbus, more specifically.
A what now?
From the Latin cumulus, which means heaped, and nimbus, which means rainstorm.
Are you mocking me?
Far from it, my generous host. This is a dense, towering cloud of water vapour, often referred to as a thundercloud.
Fine. But what is it doing in my pub?
It goes everywhere I go, for I, young purveyor of beverages, am a thunder god.
More like a rain god. Who's going to clear up that mess?
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Thor, god of thunder. This here is Mjolnir, the mighty hammer with which I smite giants and mountains asunder. And that there is my thundercloud, Neville.
Neville?
Yes, Neville. What's wrong with that?
It's not very grandiose, is it?
How rude! Don't you listen to him, Neville.
Look, Thor, Neville, whatever your name is, you can't go round bringing cold front scroll lines into my pub.
There's no sign that says so.
You're expecting a sign saying, no meteorological weather formations allowed?
Oh, what about a little stratocumulus?
No.
Cheeky nimbostratus?
I said no.
Oh, come on. You surely can't object to a nice cirriform nacreous polar stratospheric cloud.
I could, I would. I mean, I do.
Fine. Come on, Neville. We're not wanted here. Where should we... You're one of these people that's spread all over the place. Yeah, I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Where would you like to start? What's the thing you've done most recently? How about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm a freelance various things and working mostly but not entirely in tabletop role playing. for most of the beginning of my career, I was a writer. And then for most of the last, say, couple of years, I've been mostly a cultural consultant, which means that I assist other creatives in representing diverse and marginalized identities, especially those they don't share, in an equitable and awesome manner.
We literally made use of some sensitivity readers just last week for our upcoming book.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Cultural consultant and sensitivity reader are essentially synonyms, but I like the term cultural consultant better because I think it sounds cooler, and B, I think that it encourages creators to involve the consultant or the sensitivity reader earlier in the process.
Right, I see, yes.
So traditionally in publishing, sensitivity reading was at its inception. A book publisher would bring in sensitivity readers when the final draft of the manuscript was essentially almost complete, and they were about to pull the trigger on sending out galley copies. And at that point, the sensitivity reader would come in and give some feedback, and very often it would be too late to make major structural changes like this entire...
Or artistic changes is often more...
Yeah. Because you can't...
You could maybe find and replace some names, but...
Right, but you could...
If your plot line's a problem...
Exactly, yeah. So, stuff I've worked on recently. Let's see. So...
there was Jiangshi, the Hopping Vampires game.
Yes.
That sounds fun. That does sound fun.
I'm so
I wasn't familiar with it
excited
until literally yesterday.
It's not strictly an RPG, I think. But,
it is strictly an RPG, yes.
Oh,
but
marvelous.
So Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall is a tabletop role-playing game about playing a Chinese family in North America, usually, in the early 20th century. And you're trying to run a Chinese restaurant during the day, because that's the only job that you're allowed to have by law. And then you have to fight off annoying hopping vampires by night. So it's very grounded in history and the history of the Chinese Exclusion Act and all of the legal and historical reasons why Chinese restaurants are so ubiquitous in Canada and the United States, because of the restrictive immigration laws that would only allow people in if they were involved in a restaurant business.
Right, okay.
So that's providing a lot of the backdrop of it. And then there's also a lot of influence from television shows, like if you've seen Warrior on Cinemax. Not a lot of people saw that.
I have not.
That's one of the big influences. It's do you know Peaky Blinders?
Yes.
It's kind of like an American Peaky Blinders. It's based on Bruce Lee's notes.
Right.
And it's about it's set earlier than Jiangshi, but it's a
Actually,
big
no,
influence.
I have.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a trailer, I think, or maybe a bit of it. But I know the one you mean. Yeah.
It stars this English guy, Andrew Koji, as the cocky, annoying Bruce Lee character, and it's about some warring organized crime families in San Francisco when the Chinese Exclusion Act is about to pass in the late 1860s.
Right.
So it's very cool, and one of the neat things about it is that when the Chinese characters are talking amongst themselves, they speak idiomatic modern American English, but then they speak either Cantonese or English with an accent when there are white or black characters on screen.
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So the creators of Jiangshi are Senfeng Lim and Banana Chan, both of whom are from Canada. And so they brought me on to write some cultural consulting content. I'm not Chinese, so I had to lean on them for some of the details. But I have a lot of experience writing about Asian representation in other contexts. I'm Filipino American myself. So working together with them, we were able to craft a couple of pages explaining to people how to play a Chinese character, which is a thing that really intimidates a lot of people. You get this game where everyone is expected to be Chinese, and most of the RPG hobby is still a lot of white guys. So people get these games like this, or like my game Thousand Arrows, or Swordsfall.
Or Chris Bivvy's
Harlem Bound. Harlem Unbound.
Yes, Harlem Unbound.
Yeah, and then Haunted West coming out soon. So a lot of people see those and they're like, am I allowed to play this game? And my answer is, and has always been, emphatically yes. But there's a craft to it. And so in some games, I think that's more challenging than others. But in a game like Jiangshi, where I think you can trust the creators a lot to fill the game with realistic and respectful and authentic Chinese signifiers, in that context, a lot of what I'm saying is don't try. Because usually when people try, quote unquote, try to play a character of a certain ethnicity, all of the first things that leap to mind, which is not anybody's fault, it's the fault of systemic racism and bias, are often racist signifiers, or even things that aren't outright racist, but they're just kind of tired and cliche.
I'm hoping from this game, like it's got sort of a 2-mode thing where it's like during the day, and it's like you're busy building up your resources, and it's like pretty serious, and it's like it's quite good natured and quick, and then at night it goes absolutely batshit kung fu hustle crazy.
Yes, that's
what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, and there is literally it's like you said, there's like a day and night phase, and Sen has a huge amount of experience designing board games. Sen's designed like a lot of really awesome board games, and I'm not that into board games, but I still got this one over here. This guy, Legend of Korra Pro Bending Arena. That's one of Sen's games. So Jiangshi has...
So that's 2 games that I feel the need to buy right now, I've got to say.
Yeah. So the game has a lot of like cool cards and playmats and stuff that bring some kind of board game feel to the action. So it's really fun because I think that the presence of the board game components and the stuff that you're fussing around with physically, it really evokes the feeling of working with your hands in a really fast-paced setting, like a restaurant. So there's like, it feels like, rushing around to clear up tables and talk to customers and so forth. And you really have to be really careful to apportion your personal energy and time and resources, because there's more stuff to do in a day than you can necessarily do.
Can I just touch back on the cultural consultancy side of things?
Of course.
I was just wondering, because having been through that process myself just in the last, literally the last week. So I'm
for the mythological figures Kickstarter that's coming up.
Cool.
I'm just wondering, have you ever sort of had any pushback on that at all from publishers when you've, made suggestions and they've resisted it in some? I mean, other than, oh my god, it's too late to change that now, which is obviously one thing
that's
that
really
happen,
the publisher's fault should bring the creative consultant earlier.
But I mean, like more argumentative pushback ever.
Yes, that's happened. That's happened a couple of times. And
really?
Some of it doesn't happen a lot. So most of the time when I'm brought in as a cultural consultant, I'm dealing almost entirely with people who are really happy to be there. Most of my clients are smaller. They're outfits of like a single-digit number of people or a low double-digit number of people. So when they bring me on, they're really excited for me to be there. They want me to be there. They've already opted into the thing that I'm doing. So that's most of my work, and that's great. However, sometimes, especially when I'm working with a larger company or a company where my contact there isn't necessarily the executive or producer or manager who's ultimately signing off on the thing. So those are the circumstances where sometimes I will get some pushback. And the pushback usually takes one of a couple of different forms. It's not very common that I get like raging reactionary ire. Like when I visited Wizards of the Coast to give a presentation back in January, I just posted, "Hey, I'm at Wizards of the Coast today," and I got this long stream of angry people on Twitter. I was accused of starting a death cult. Someone sent me elf porn. There was just all kinds of like, oh my god, this guy is going to single-handedly destroy the hobby in the course of a 2-hour workshop at Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
And I'm like, there's already been five editions of what you want, man. Like, you're already really good at pretending there's no gay people in this game. Like, why? You're going to be able to ignore me. You'll be fine. So, usually, when I get the pushback, it's not that. it's of the format like, well, why do we really need this? Did the data support that we actually need this? I read a study that said that implicit bias training actually makes companies worse at things. So isn't this guy going to make us more racist? Isn't calling out all of these racist things is he going to put racist ideas in my head that weren't there before? So it's usually of this format.
Right, I see.
Interesting.
Well, I suppose to an extent, that's kind of, you've done your job, and if they don't want to accept it, then that's their problem, not yours, isn't it? But
and there are definitely times when I give some feedback to someone, and almost always the person's like, yeah, absolutely, we can do this. And then sometimes if the company is big and there are a lot of different like workflows that are siloed from one another, I'll give that feedback to one person, and then there will be a game of telephone in which it gets lost. So that by the time I see the final thing, I'm like, hey, I said we had to change that name because it's associated with such and such a thing. What happened?
Yeah.
And then sometimes because of the chain of communication breaking down, something happens. And when that happens, I can't tell whether it's... I always assume that it's just somebody forgot. But it's also possible that someone saw this thing and was like, no, I need to change this because it's, I don't know, like SJW PC culture or something.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine a lot of, if there is pushback, a lot of that would come more from like fans than actual professionals working on books, you would think.
I think
you do tend to see sort of reactionary explosions on the internet from fans on this sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think all of the most vocal enmity comes from fans. I think that people in professional settings have, even if they don't actually agree with all the stuff that I'm saying, I think they have an incentive to listen to me just because they don't want people yelling at them on the internet.
Sure, yeah.
And a lot of these people, if they made something that were too far in the other direction, that were too far, that were upsetting, like, these people who are sending me elf porn and accusing me of starting death cults, like, people know how to argue with those guys sometimes if they if they have tendencies in that direction, but they don't necessarily know how to argue with people who agree with me. Right. So even assuming the worst about somebody, having the least optimistic view towards someone who I'm interacting with, they still have an incentive to listen to me, if only to save themselves some trouble.
But they've got themselves into the point where they're paying you, so once they've reached that stage of the process, not listening to you does seem to be a colossal waste of money, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I find very baffling about this conversation. Like, people are paying you for your advice and they're ignoring it. I can't say that's an entirely unfamiliar situation to me, but it's like, why would you do that? Just to pay for the advice and cut out the middleman.
and sometimes it's a personality thing. Like, I've worked with people who really identify as like rebels or contrarians,
right?
Who have gotten a lot of positive attention in the past for getting out in public and sounding as iconoclastic as possible and saying this is the norm, this is the standard, this is what you're thinking, but what you're thinking is actually wrong, and actually we're going to do this other thing and you're going to love it. And so if someone has been rewarded repeatedly for doing exactly that,
then they're going to continue doing that.
Then I'm not surprised if they have a similar reaction to, Mendez gave us this safe advice on how to be politically correct. Side note: politically correct is a term only used by people claiming that they're not politically correct. No one ever says, "I want to be politically correct" anymore. No one says that.
It's like, this is not the same thing. Like, someone telling you off for being rude is not the same as someone dragging you out back and shooting in the head. These are different.
So if people are like are really, really excited about their own ability to disagree with other people and get rewarded for it, that's going to be a harder person for me to work with as a cultural consultant.
You get a few of those on the internet as well, of course. I think the internet kind of magnifies people's ability to do that, especially when you get a small little, cult of personality around somebody who continue reinforce to them that they're right, or they should carry on doing what they're doing.
We're naming absolutely no names there.
We are not.
We're not.
Have you ever sort of consulted on a project where you've looked at it and you've just thought, I mean, not naming names, but you just looked at it and said, oh my God, there's no rescuing this. This is...
Yes.
I can't consult on this. All I can say is start again from
yes,
scratch.
that frequently happens.
Yeah.
Oh dear, frequently.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Frequent. Oh, that's a lot. That's
Yeah.
okay. So
And
on the one hand, I'm sort of appalled because that's really bad. On the other hand, I'm sort of excited. Katie, that's more.
Like so many of them, there are many of them where I just can't say anything because it's punching down. But I think most of in a lot of these cases, the conversation tends to break down early.
Right.
And the end of the project is just someone stops returning my messages.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh well, what a shame. I'll be okay. But very often that comes to me in the format of I get a panicked instant message from a friend saying, hey, I saw that this person I vaguely know is starting a board game project, and it has like it has a racial slur in the title, or the cover art is already like a horrific offensive thing, or some so there's some like unbelievably like none of the women wear shirts. There's these kinds of things.
Okay.
And then I usually I start a Facebook conversation or something like that with the person involved, and I'm like, and I put on my kindergarten teacher voice, and I'm like, hey, I saw you have a new project. That's great. I noticed none of the women have shirts. Have you considered they might be cold? Something like that. And then usually I get some responses which are of the format, oh yes, we're trying to be really respectful. There's an Indian person at my office and we ran it by her and she said, I guess it's fine. But we would love to get some feedback from you. And then I say something like, okay, so this is my job and you would have to pay me a little bit. And then sometimes they're like, I'll check on budget and get back to you. And
you never hear from them again.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm, and I'm looking at the art, which is like, it's poorly rendered art from Poser of like a bunch of, white people culturally appropriating somebody else's outfits, or, the aforementioned women with no shirts, or and I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'll let this go by. There's only one project I can think of where I actually had to, I was briefly attached to it and then I bailed on it. But that one was...
You felt a bit fig leafy.
Yeah. It was a project, and it was in its early stages, but it was a Western project. And I always say Westerns are the single hardest genre to do. And because they're so deeply embedded in American culture, everyone thinks, oh, Westerns are going to be fine. I'll just make it diverse. But no, everything about the Wild West genre is about imperialism and genocide. There's no way around it. You can't, and that's the problem with it. It's like making a good game about the Wild West, as awesome as it is, when you get the occasional Chris Spivey doing it. It's like trying to make a game about the antebellum South, where even if you make the best game in the world and you prioritize the experience of people who suffered systemic oppression, there's still going to be half the people showing up to play this game who are there because they want to be Scarlett O'Hara or John Wayne. And you still gotta figure out how to deal with those people. But yeah, there was this Western game where I pointed that out and I was like, look, there's no way around you needing an American Indian consultant on this. And that's going to take time for me to find if you want me to do it. And I can't even promise you I'm going to find someone from a nation that's actually relevant to your game. So they went ahead with some stuff that I told them would be like the next best thing, but still not enough. And I looked at the next draft of the project and I was like, I don't think I can help here. Right. I wasn't getting paid. I was doing it as like a favor to a friend, and it was before like any money had changed hands. So I was just like, I'm just gonna step back from that.
Yeah.
And they were trying to make like a good, diverse Western game, and a lot of the aspects of the project with regard to representation were cool, but there was just no way around this like giant mountain of imperialism and genocide.
Yeah. Do you tend to find that it tends to be good intentioned misunderstanding more often than it is kind of
almost
willful?
Always good intentioned misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I think it would be easier if it weren't. If people,
it would be better if people were just good and
right?
bad.
Because if it were. if I were dealing with cartoon villains who are rubbing their hands together and saying, haha, I'm going to exploit all the Asians, haha.
Yeah.
Twiddling their dicks
Right.
dastardly mustaches.
You know, if it were like,
it would be easier,
if it were like burning crosses on people's lawns and like punching Asians and accusing us of spreading COVID, like that would be easy to deal with because the villains are obvious and clear. But much more often, the problems come from this like uncanny valley place where people have good intentions or ideas that started out really good. So like
they're not people that you describe as common or garden racists.
Right.
It's like people who are generally quite cool.
Right.
But they have unexamined attitudes which are
Right.
racist.
They could possibly get
And
a
that conversation
little
we
defensive,
say,
maybe, when called on it.
Yeah.
Is that maybe
because you start saying racist and people get really, really upset.
Because people are. I think the way that I was brought up, the way we were exposed to racism in school and in the media. The goal was to become not racist. And people think, like, if I do all these things, I treat people as equals, then I become not racist. And that's not how racism works, because it lives in like the realm of unconscious and implicit bias and stuff like that. So the problem isn't that like you're not racist enough. It's that everybody's racist. There's no way around it. And the only way to be anti-racist is to own that you're racist. And then like know that stuff's going on for you, for everybody, and then to work against it. So this is why I say there's never, not even I'm not racist, but you never need in your life to say the words I'm not racist. Because a lot of the people who are most attached to that idea are most vulnerable to making mistakes that a cultural consultant needs to fix. Because like they're trying to do something right. Like, because they'll do something that is harmful or is a problem for people. And they won't know because they'll think like this whole time I was thinking anti-racist thoughts. Or my intent in doing this, the thing that I wanted to communicate was the opposite of this thing you're telling me it communicates. And that's the hardest thing to deal with. The people who have good intentions and whose ideas even are like part good, but they can't let go of the ways in which it's also bad.
Yeah.
No, it's like one of those differences between sympathy and empathy. Like you can empathise with someone, you can say, yeah, I can see why it's really hard for you to let go because that's how you've been programmed by culture your entire life. Like that's empathy. It's like, yeah, no, I get it. I've seen the same stuff. I've seen the same things. The sympathy part is, but this can't go on. It's like, yeah, I know it's hard, but you need to stop it. So yeah,
definitely. And we say stuff and we do stuff that's unintentionally harmful all the time. And it's okay to notice that. This is what I call I call these nice things we can't have, right? If there's stuff that's out of context, in a vacuum, if someone completely understood what you meant to say when you said it, if that stuff were going on, then, of course we'd realize that you're not racist, but because somebody else, somewhere, who's like probably in the Proud Boys or something like that, because one of those jerks took some signifier and ruined it, now we can't have nice things anymore. And it's terrible. It sucks. And it sucks that like you can't say this thing or do this thing that otherwise would be innocuous anymore. But because it is, because someone ruined it, you got to be aware of that. Like it's not, if you want to like paint your face a dark color because you want to be Drizzt Do'Urden and you think that's cool, so you paint your face with like, gray face paint, and there was not a racist thought in your mind when you put that face paint on, okay, great, but the problem is that there's this long-ass history of people putting dark makeup on their faces.
Yeah, it means something else,
right.
yeah. Even if you don't know it means something else, it does mean something else.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not your fault that you can't put dark makeup on your face. And we don't think that you intended to put on a minstrel show while dressed as Drizzt Do'Urden. But because somebody else ruined that thing, that's a nice thing you can't have. And it's bad. But
Don't get mad at the people telling you about this. Get mad at the people who ruined this nice thing that you can no longer have. Like, if you want to be a photo negative, that's not cool.
Yeah, like we all saw that episode of Community,
and that's not
right?
your fault.
Ken Jeong.
To be fair, I saw it. I saw it on Space Force the other night. I'm like, it's like, okay, so you dressed up as a photo negative. Okay, that's awkward. But it's like, don't be mad. It's not the people telling you; it's the people who've done it and have been awful about it, and who are still doing it and still being awful about it. Like these people need to quit it. So the rest of us can have nice things.
How long ago was Justin Trudeau doing this stuff?
Less than a decade. I'd have to Google it. Yeah.
So how do you get into a job like that then? Because it's not. I think when people think I'm going to get into RPGs, that's probably not the first job that they think of. They think writing. They think. Well, writing is the first thing they think, obviously. But
right.
Artists and things like that.
So
I don't think about layout artist.
Yeah, but how do you end up being like a cultural consultant? What's the kind of route into that?
The answer to many of these questions for my own personal career path is accidents or bad luck. So I started.
Well, that's most of our careers, to be
fair.
It's bad luck that you became a cultural consultant.
that part was good luck, but for
right.
So for a really long time, whenever I got hired to write something in RPGs, maybe not always, but it often was someone wanted me to write a subject that other people didn't feel comfortable writing because it had something to do with usually Asian or African culture. I'm not African, but I have an academic background in West African religion. So there are specific topics in like West African and Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Atlantic religion where I have like specific kinds of knowledge that I can help with. So usually it would have... So
someone comes up to you and say, I've got this great idea for a voodoo priest. Can you help me out, James?
Let me get a drink and then then I got you. The voodoo priest I talk to most often is a white lady. That's a weird story for some other time. But she's great though. But yeah, so so it would usually be there was some element of Asian culture or African religious or martial culture because I also play capoeira, and so I'd be brought in to write something related to those things. In the latter case, usually I'd show up like, okay, just starting out in this industry, I need a job, but you asked a black person first, right? So yeah, and this happened all the time with like surprise elements of content. Like I'd be writing a book that I thought was about one thing, and then someone else I was collaborating with would bring in another cultural element that I didn't think I needed to know about to work with it, but like there was suddenly this thing from like Russian culture that I needed to go and research and come give people feedback on. So a lot of times people don't know what they don't know, and then they end up asking me about it. So as a writer, I was always brought in to essentially do things that you would otherwise need a cultural consultant for. Then over the course of writing, usually I'm collaborating on a big book with a lot of other people. So people would end up coming to me and asking me, oh, hey, just read through the book, make sure there's no typos. And if you catch anything, that you think we should change. And then I'd read through it and I'd be like, I'd catch something that wasn't necessarily my job to catch, but I thought it would probably be a good idea to mention, not to describe people of color using food terms like almond eyes or chocolate skin.
Right.
So I ended up getting a lot of experience doing cultural consulting just by being a writer. And during the course of that time, I also started building up a network of other creatives who were doing similar things so that we could talk to each other in a space that felt safe, and they could. You got
a level of expertise about non-American cultures,
right? Yeah, that kind of thing, where we could exchange ideas and help each other out with similar stuff. And then eventually, I realized, well, there's so many writers doing this, and like writing is fun, but it's hard. I can't do that much of it because it takes so much energy out of me. Whereas, I write for 5 hours and I feel tired. Whereas if I tell people that they're racist for 5 hours, it turns out I feel energized. And that's just some weird, morbid thing about me. And it's not true of a lot of people because a lot of people of color are already exhausted from just having their normal day. And they don't have any energy at the end of it to like opt into helping somebody else out with their racism. So that's, I guess, that would be the bad luck element of it for a lot of people. Pointing this stuff out and talking to people about it all day like sounds rightfully like a nightmare to a lot of people. So cultural consulting ended up becoming a huge part of my job as a writer. And then soon it started to take up more and more of my time. And now like I feel like it's easier to identify myself as a cultural consultant than a writer because it seems more distinctive when like almost everybody I know is a writer. In terms of how other people could get into this kind of job, now that a few of us have started doing this, there's a pretty robust mentorship network. So I'd say if you're listening to this and you want to become a cultural consultant, whatever your background is, I want to talk to you about it. Yeah. So, go find my Twitter, slide into my DMs and ask me about cultural consulting, because I think anybody could do cultural consulting if, they do the right kind of research. So
you need the right grounding and background and knowledge.
Absolutely. And there's, like with other jobs in RPGs, it's really hard to do this as a full-time thing. And it's not something I would even recommend. But over my time doing this, doing cultural consulting in RPGs, I've also met some people through gaming who have helped me get cultural consulting jobs outside of RPGs. So there's an educational media company which makes educational syllabi and textbooks and videos and stuff like that, and video games and that schools buy and implement in their curricula. And I got into working for one of those companies just through someone who came to one of my panels at PAX Unplugged. So now I'm starting.
I bet they pay better too.
Yeah. So that's starting to diversify, and I'm seeing this happening in other industries as well. And that's really heartening to me, because it turns out that I think this stuff is fun even when it's happening at a bank or a hedge fund. I'm starting to get into the HR bias training space through some mentorship from other people who I know. So if you're interested in getting into this stuff, if you want to learn about it, I want to take down the barrier. I want to open the gate. So hit me up and I'll help you out.
Fantastic. That's a really generous offer. Really good.
From the point of view of someone who's kind of been through the process from the other end recently, not with you, but with other people. But I definitely think that if you're a publisher or a writer considering using a cultural consultant, putting aside any issues of whether or not it's the right thing to do, which it is, but putting that aside, I definitely think it made the book better. It just made it a better book.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I always prioritize is, because if I want someone to take my suggestion, then it's good if I'm like, hey, if you do this, you won't be racist. But it's even better if I say, hey, if you do this, then your game will be better and more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, from the point of view of our book, because it covers a whole bunch of different mythological figures and stuff from various places around the world and times in history, it's almost, I don't want to say an educational book, because it's not, it's a game book, and the entries are fairly short. But, I've had people read the book and, they find it interesting and they're learning about these characters and history. So you want to be sure that the information you're giving them is appropriate and correct, and you're not filling their head with nonsense or weird westernized imaginings that
Orientalist reimaginings of raksasas with tiger faces.
Yeah, basically. You end up with a better book as a result.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of cultural consultants have really great ideas and can think of things that, I don't know, I talked earlier about how I try not to have any original thoughts, and I don't, but I do like to, when I'm ripping people off, I do like to rip off less commonly ripped off sources, traditional epic poetry from different countries. If I'm ripping off a source that is less commonly ripped off, that often looks a lot like an original idea. And no one will be the wiser.
So do you get much time to do much directly creative work these days, or is it mainly consulting work?
A lot of times I do. So for Agon, for example, Agon is it's a game that just got its second edition. It's from Evil Hat Productions, and it's by John Harper. And everything John Harper touches turns to gold, I think. So Agon is about Greek heroes getting lost, traveling from island to island in the Mediterranean, and having strange adventures on each island. And there was in another life I was going to be a classics major, so I love this stuff. So Agon was really interesting because I was doing cultural consulting on white people. I was doing cultural consulting on Greek culture.
Right.
But thankfully I was not doing it alone. I was working with my friend John Stavropoulos, who's from Sparta. So he and I collaborated on talking about Greek culture and how to be sensitive and respectful towards the struggles that Greek people have both historically and in the present day. And so I learned a huge amount working on that. And I was also really, really grateful that the company did something which I think is always a great idea if you have the resources for it, which is pairing an experienced cultural consultant with someone who's actually from that background. And so John knows loads and loads about Greek culture, but he just didn't feel as comfortable or as excited doing the technical aspects of cultural consulting and like how to present those things. So by working together, we were able to create something that I thought was really, really cool. And going back to this mentorship idea, whenever I'm like mentoring a new cultural consultant, this is one of the things that I try to do. I'll like set up a situation where we're working together. If they're the person from that background, they get the lion's share of the resources, and then we both get to learn stuff. And I'm really a collaborative worker at heart. So that works really well for me. But in addition to doing the cultural consulting stuff on Agon, I also got to write a couple islands for you to get lost on. The island that I wrote is based on the similarities between ancient Greek epic poetry and hip hop. So I have a little side project.
Could you unpack a little bit?
Oh yeah, sure.
I'm not quite sure I see.
So epic poetry of the kind that Homer might have composed.
Oh.
So epic poetry.
It's a strictly oral tradition.
Yeah, it's an oral tradition. And if you read through the Iliad, you'll notice that there are a bunch of repeated sections. They're called formulae. And these formulae are actually kind of like a chorus. So the poet who originally performed these things was actually freestyling for a lot of the poet. So they would freestyle over musical accompaniment, this oral tradition. And then the formulae are like the chorus or the hook that allows them to make up the next section of the poem or get ready to freestyle that. And then I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of the subject matter. This booty and ostentatious modes of transportation and machismo and beef and personality clashes writ large. Lots of sex and violence sorted stuff combined with like the heights of poetic expression. And I got really interested in that in college, and I started doing this translation of the Iliad, where I'm translating it into modern rap. And so that's like a little side project I go back to from time to time, translating the Iliad into rap from Greek.
As you do.
Yeah, as you do.
And is this ever going to be performed? Is more the question.
Yeah. That's my other Patreon that I have the non-gaming Patreon that I eventually have to resurrect. But and even the word for a performer of traditional Greek epic is rhapsodos, rhapsode, or
because they rhapsodize about things.
So
absolutely.
It's almost the same word as rapper. Like it's. So I wrote an island for Agon that is that's based on those crossovers, and so it's an island where Apollo and the Muses are competing for control of the island because it's Apollo and the Muses, they've nominated champions to go at each other in rap and dance battles.
Okay.
So that, and then, there's like a little bit of tie-in to my Iliad translation, which you can find on my website. Yeah. So that was really fun. And I got to work with Sean Nittner at Evil Hat to really polish it. And, I was really excited about that. Another island that I'm working on, which will hopefully come out a little bit later, it's based on Polynesian mythology. Mm-hmm. So, the Greek heroes get so super lost that they wind up on a mythological island that's based on Maori and Hawaiian and Tongan and so forth mythology, and I'm still working on that one. And that's another big challenge, and because it's introducing these Greek heroes to a land where the terrain is different, the gods are different. Instead of looking to Demeter and Athena to help you, you have to look to Rongo and Tu and Tane. So I'm working on that one, and then that ties into a section in the cultural consulting bit about bringing other mythologies into the world of Agon. So I have a couple of examples in the cultural consulting section of how you bring in like Yoruba or Caribbean mythology or Philippine mythology, and then this island is another example of that.
I mean, that does sound really cool, I'll say.
And then, of course, my biggest project right now is Thousand Arrows, which is an Apocalypse World hack about the Japanese Warring States period that's coming out later this year. So that's the bulk of my writing time.
Yeah. It all looks pretty good. You can find out more if you're interested at jamesmendezhodes.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it Hodes or Hodes?
It's either, actually. I've always pronounced it Hodes, but
Whichever way
I recently found out my grandfather pronounced it Hodes. So, yeah, I'm not picky anymore.
Maybe.
I guess it's up to you, I guess, really. It's your name.
Yeah.
It is your name, so you can go. So jamesmendezhodes.com. You can find out a lot more there.
Right.
But I'm afraid, as Stephen Hawkins always used to say, time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana, and we've really got to be winding things up. We're running out of time, I'm afraid.
Well, this is really fun.
So, thank you so much for coming on.
I'm glad you liked it.
Really enjoyed that conversation and learned a lot.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah. So I'm going to sign off now. So thank you everybody for listening. Next week we have got John Hodgson, who's going to come on and talk all about Beowulf to us.
Ooh, we're on a real classical kick at the
There's a
moment.
Kickstarter going on right now with a 5th edition powered Beowulf setting.
Fantastic.
But until then, that will be goodbye from me, Russ.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter Coffey, from the Southampton Guild of Role Players.
Goodbye from me, James Mendez Hodes.
Apparently I now have to read this to you. This is the official podcast of Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG news, which you can find at enworld.org. You can find show notes at morris.podbean.com or wherever you found the podcast. If you feel like they deserve it, you can support the show on Patreon. In return, you will receive exclusive bonus content. Just go to patreon.com/Morris. If you're interested in his babbling nonsense, you can follow at Morris on the Twitter. Send your emails to morrispodcast@gmail.com. Not all of your emails, just the ones you want us to see. That's it. I'm bored now. You can go away. Shoo, off you go. Goodbye. Get out of here.